Place number 1 is a lake so beautiful, it looks like it was painted by hand. Turquoise water surrounded by lush forest, with a surface so still it mirrors the sky above like perfect glass. If you saw a photo of Lake Karachay without knowing what it was, you would probably add it to your travel bucket list immediately. You might even imagine yourself diving into those calm, inviting waters on a hot summer day. But here is the truth nobody tells you when they show you those pictures. Lake Karachay, located in the southern Ural Mountains of Russia, is not just the most polluted lake on Earth. Scientists have calculated that standing on its shore for just 1 hour exposes you to a radiation dose of 600 roentgens, enough to kill a human being. Not eventually, not over time, right then. That single hour is a lethal dose. You would not need to swim. You would not need to touch the water. Just standing nearby is enough to seal your fate. But how did this happen? How does a place that looks so naturally pristine carry such invisible, deadly weight? The story begins in the late 1940s, during the height of the Cold War arms race, when the Soviet Union was desperately trying to match the nuclear capabilities of the United States. Speed was everything. Safety was secondary. The Mayak Production Association was established near the city of Chelyabinsk as one of the Soviet Union's first nuclear weapons production facilities. For years, decades, actually, the facility used Lake Karachay as a direct dumping ground for radioactive waste. Not as an accident, not as a spill, as a deliberate, ongoing, systematic practice. They simply poured the byproducts of nuclear weapons manufacturing directly into the lake. The scale of contamination that followed is almost incomprehensible. The lake absorbed so much radioactive material that it became, in the words of researchers who have studied it, the most polluted spot on Earth. The World Watch Institute, a Washington-based environmental organization, formally gave it that title in 1992. By that point, the lake contained an estimated 4.44 exabecquerels of radioactivity, a number so large it barely registers as meaningful to the human mind. For context, the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, one of the worst nuclear accidents in history, released an estimated 5.9 exabecquerels of radioactivity into the environment. Lake Karachay, this single body of water, had accumulated nearly as much contamination as the entire Chernobyl explosion, except concentrated in one lake that you could walk around in a few hours. The danger did not stay confined to the lake itself. In 1968, a severe drought caused water levels to drop significantly, exposing contaminated sediment along the shoreline. Winds then carried radioactive dust across an enormous area, exposing approximately 500,000 people in the surrounding region to significant radiation. The Soviets eventually responded by filling the lake with concrete and hollow blocks to prevent future wind dispersal, but the contamination had already seeped deep into the groundwater system. To this day, scientists studying the region find radioactive isotopes, primarily cesium-137 and strontium-90, moving through the local water table, spreading the contamination further year after year. The Teka River, which flows near the facility, has also been heavily contaminated, and communities that lived along its banks for generations have experienced dramatically elevated rates of cancer, leukemia, and other radiation-related illnesses. Lake Karachay is technically closed to the public. No swimming, no fishing, no casual visits. But it serves as a haunting reminder that some of the most dangerous places in the world do not announce themselves with obvious warning signs. Sometimes the deadliest waters in the world are the ones that look the most beautiful. And if that thought makes you want to stay close to the shore and think twice before diving in somewhere unfamiliar, good. Hold on to that feeling, because where we are going next makes Lake Karachay look almost manageable by comparison. The second place on this list does not hide its danger behind beautiful colors or serene scenery. The boiling lake of Dominica announces exactly what it is the moment you see it. Located deep within the Morne Trois Pitons National Park on the Caribbean island of Dominica, this is not a metaphor. This is not hyperbole. This is a geological phenomenon that has been actively boiling since European explorers first encountered it in 1870, and it has not stopped since. The boiling lake is the second largest boiling lake on Earth, stretching approximately 60 meters across, and its surface temperature ranges between 82 and 92 degrees Celsius at the edges, approaching, and sometimes exceeding, the boiling point of water. At the center, the temperatures are so extreme and the water churns so violently that no reliable measurement has ever been successfully taken there. Scientists believe the temperature at the core is significantly higher, but the turbulence makes any direct measurement practically impossible. The lake is essentially a fumarole, a vent in the Earth's crust, through which volcanic gases and superheated water escape directly from the magma below. The water that fills the lake is not simply warm. It is actively heated from beneath by volcanic activity, and the surface of the lake is always in a state of violent agitation, with gray-blue water bubbling and churning and releasing massive clouds of vapor that obscure the center entirely. The surrounding area smells strongly of sulfur, and the gases venting from below include both carbon dioxide and hydrogen sulfide, both of which can be dangerous in high concentrations. Getting to the boiling lake requires a demanding hike of approximately 7 kilometers through dense rainforest, including a crossing through an area called the Valley of Desolation, a barren, otherworldly landscape of bubbling mud pools, sulfurous hot springs, and venting fumaroles that seems to belong on another planet. And yet people make this hike regularly, drawn by the extraordinary spectacle at the end of the trail. The view from the rim is genuinely one of the most dramatic natural sights on Earth. A cauldron of churning gray water surrounded by sheer rock walls, with vapor rising in great billowing clouds. What makes this place particularly treacherous is how unpredictable it is. The lake has been known to drain partially and then refill, driven by shifts in the volcanic activity below. In 2006, it drained almost completely, leaving behind a crater of superhot mud and gas vents, before slowly refilling over the following months. Changes in volcanic activity can cause sudden and dramatic fluctuations in temperature, gas output, and lake level with virtually no warning. People hiking to the lake have been caught off guard by sudden increases in toxic gas concentration, and the trail passes close enough to active hydrothermal features that a misplaced step can mean sinking into a scalding hot spring. Nobody should attempt to touch the water. Nobody should attempt to wade in. And yet the lake has a magnetic pull that sometimes makes rational judgment harder than it should be. The sheer visual drama, the churning surface, the rising steam, the smell of deep earth, creates a hypnotic fascination that is difficult to describe unless you have experienced it. The boiling lake is one of those places where the most dangerous action seems somehow connected to the overwhelming desire to be closer to something this raw. That desire is the lake's most dangerous quality. If you ever stand on that rim and feel it, recognize it for what it is. Step back, take a photograph, and remember that some experiences are better witnessed than participated in. There is a stretch of coastline in Western Australia that looks, from above, like paradise. White sand beaches, clear water, the kind of scenery that gets used in travel advertisements for luxury resorts. But the local residents of the Kimberley coast know something that tourists often learn the hard way. These waters are home to one of the highest concentrations of saltwater crocodiles on the planet, combined with some of the most extreme tidal conditions anywhere in the world. Welcome to Horizontal Falls and the broader tidal wilderness of the Buccaneer Archipelago, the third place on this list where swimming is not just inadvisable, but potentially a death sentence delivered within minutes. The horizontal falls themselves are a unique and genuinely extraordinary phenomenon. They occur in a narrow gorge in the McClarty Range, where massive tidal movements. The tides in this region are among the largest in the world, sometimes exceeding 10 meters in height, force enormous volumes of water through two narrow gaps in the rock at tremendous speed. The name, Horizontal Falls, is a slight misnomer. The water does not fall vertically, but rather rushes horizontally through the gaps at such force that it creates a visible difference in water level on either side of the passage, sometimes as much as 4 meters, producing a roaring, churning wall of moving water that crashes through the opening with extraordinary power. Sir David Attenborough described the horizontal falls as one of the greatest natural wonders he had ever seen. That endorsement has brought considerable tourist attention to the region. But here is what the travel brochures tend not to emphasize. The tidal currents in and around the Buccaneer Archipelago are so powerful that they regularly move boats in ways their pilots do not intend. The undertow in certain areas can pull a swimmer under in seconds. And moving through these waters at the wrong point in the tidal cycle means being caught in currents moving at speeds that no human swimmer, regardless of fitness level, can overcome. People have entered these waters intending to swim short distances and been carried kilometers from where they entered before rescuers could reach them. Then there are the crocodiles, saltwater crocodiles, the largest living reptiles on Earth, capable of reaching lengths of 6 meters and weights exceeding 1,000 kilograms, are not occasional visitors to the Kimberley coast. They are a permanent, thriving, apex presence. They are in the tidal flats, the river mouths, the estuaries, and resting on the beaches that look so inviting from the air. Saltwater crocodiles are ambush predators that can remain completely still in the water for extraordinary periods, with only their nostrils and eyes above the surface. They do not charge dramatically from the shore. They wait, patiently, invisibly, and when they move, they cover short distances with explosive speed that that most people cannot register before it is already over. A large saltwater crocodile can launch itself almost entirely from the water in a strike that ends in a fraction of a second. The Kimberley coast has produced multiple fatal crocodile attacks, and authorities consistently and emphatically warn tourists against swimming anywhere in the region. This warning is routinely ignored, often with tragic results. The combination of extreme tidal forces and large predatory reptiles creates a system where swimming stacks multiple independent causes of death simultaneously. You could be an Olympic swimmer and have no answer to a 4-meter crocodile that has decided you are its next meal, because it will not give you a fair fight. There is no fair fight with a saltwater crocodile. If you are the kind of person who reads that and thinks, well, you would just have to be careful, the Kimberley coast hears that a lot. It does not care. Place number 4 exists in the imagination of most people as something from myth. A sea so salty that you float effortlessly on the surface, like a human cork, unable to sink even if you tried. This mythological quality, the famous buoyancy of the Dead Sea, located on the border between Israel and Jordan, has made it one of the most visited bodies of water in the entire world. And while the Dead Sea is indeed open to visitors, and people do float in it regularly, the reality of this extraordinary lake is far more complex and far more dangerous than the floating selfies suggest. The Dead Sea sits at approximately 430 meters below sea level, making it the lowest point on dry land on the entire surface of the Earth. It is fed by the Jordan River, but has no outlet. Water only leaves through evaporation. Over thousands of years, this has created a body of water with a salinity of approximately 34%, nearly 10 times the salinity of regular ocean water. This is why nothing lives in it. No fish. No seaweed. No visible life of any kind, except certain specialized microorganisms. The dead, in its name, is not poetic. It is literal. And it is this same extreme salinity that creates the famous buoyancy and the less famous dangers. The salinity of the Dead Sea creates several serious risks that are not obvious to first-time visitors. The water is not just salty, it is dense with dissolved minerals, including magnesium, sodium, calcium, and potassium, in concentrations that the human body is not designed to process. Even a small amount of dead seawater swallowed accidentally can cause serious electrolyte imbalances, and ingesting larger amounts can be fatal. This is not theoretical. There have been documented deaths caused by aspiration of dead seawater. When you inhale even a small amount of regular seawater, the salt concentration, while harmful, is not immediately overwhelming. When you inhale dead seawater, the extreme mineral concentration triggers an immediate and severe physiological response. The lungs fill with fluid through osmosis as your body attempts to dilute the concentration, a process that can cause acute pulmonary edema, which is a medical emergency. People have drowned in the Dead Sea, not because they were overwhelmed by waves or currents, but because they lost their balance while floating, accidentally inhaled water, and could not recover. The extreme buoyancy itself is a trap for the unwary. In regular water, a person who falls face down can usually right themselves easily. In Dead Sea water, the buoyancy makes righting yourself unexpectedly difficult. Your legs want to float up, your center of gravity shifts. People who have lost their footing, particularly near the water's edge where salt crystallizes on the rocks, making surfaces treacherously slippery, have found themselves face down in water they cannot turn over in, unable to get purchase on the slippery bottom. The lake's shores are also lined with razor-sharp salt crystals that cause severe cuts, and salt water in open wounds creates burning pain that triggers panic, compounding any emergency dramatically. And then there are the sinkholes. As the Dead Sea has shrunk dramatically over recent decades, its water level dropping by more than a meter per year as freshwater inflows have been diverted for agriculture, the retreat of the shoreline has created an accelerating sinkhole crisis. As freshwater beneath the salt-saturated shoreline is replaced by receding Dead Sea water, it dissolves underground salt layers, creating cavities that collapse suddenly and without warning. Sinkholes have opened on beaches crowded with tourists. They have swallowed roads and entire sections of shoreline. The area now has thousands of sinkholes that continue to expand. Infrastructure, built near the shore, regularly disappears into the ground. Walking certain sections, let alone swimming, carries the real risk of the ground simply opening beneath your feet. The Dead Sea is simultaneously one of the most extraordinary and one of the most underestimated dangerous bodies of water on the planet. Visit it if you can. Float carefully in the designated areas with lifeguards present. Keep your head up. Do not swim in rough weather. Do not swallow the water. and watch where you walk on the shore. And before you do any of that, wait until you hear what is waiting for you in our final entry, because we saved the most terrifying for last. The fifth and final place on this list is not a lake, not a river, not a sea. It is a stretch of ocean, specifically the waters surrounding the Citarum River Delta on the northern coast of West Java, Indonesia, and the broader zone of coastal pollution that extends from that river's mouth into the Java Sea. The Citarum has been called, by multiple credible international sources, including Time magazine and the World Bank, the most polluted river on Earth. That is not a casual designation. It is a measured, documented, scientifically supported conclusion based on water quality data that consistently records contamination at levels so extreme they challenge the instruments used to measure them. The Citarum flows approximately 297 kilometers from its source in the mountains of West Java to the Java Sea, passing through one of the most densely industrialized regions in Southeast Asia. It is the primary water source for approximately 35 million people. It is also the primary waste disposal system for hundreds of factories producing textiles, leather, chemicals, and electronics, as well as the direct recipient of untreated sewage from the millions of people who live along its banks. Assessments have found lead concentrations more than 1,000 times the safety standards set by the United States Environmental Protection Agency. Aluminum, manganese, iron, and a catalog of toxic industrial chemicals have been measured at similarly nightmarish concentrations. The surface of the Citarum, in its lower reaches particularly, is frequently not visible at all. It is covered by a solid-looking mass of plastic waste, agricultural debris, foam, chemical discharge, and organic waste so dense that in photographs it is genuinely difficult to tell that there is water beneath it. The smell is reported by journalists and researchers who have visited as one of the most overpowering they have ever experienced, a combination of rotting organic matter, chemical solvents, and sewage that forces visitors to cover their faces even from considerable distances. Fish populations in the river have been essentially wiped out across vast stretches. The few people who still attempt to fish in parts of the Citarum are fishing not for food they intend to eat themselves, but for scraps that can be sold. Where the Citarum meets the Java Sea, this concentrated torrent of contamination disperses into the coastal waters, creating a zone of pollution that affects the beaches and nearshore waters along this section of the Javanese coast. For anyone who enters these waters, and fishing communities in the region have little choice but to do so, the health consequences are well documented. Studies of communities living along the Citarum have found dramatically elevated rates of skin disease, respiratory illness, gastrointestinal disorders, and toxic heavy metal accumulation in blood samples taken from residents. Children growing up in the region show signs of developmental impact from chronic low-level heavy metal exposure. Women of childbearing age have been found to have mercury and lead levels in their blood that exceed safe thresholds by significant margins. These are not speculative risks. They are measurable, documented, ongoing health catastrophes being experienced by real people in real communities right now, as you read these words. The Indonesian government launched a significant cleanup effort beginning in 2018, deploying military personnel to help remove waste, shutting down some of the worst industrial polluters, and investing in new water treatment infrastructure. The results have been meaningful. The volume of waste entering the river has decreased, and some sections show measurable improvement. But the scale of contamination accumulated over generations means that a full recovery, if it is even possible, would take decades of sustained effort. The coastal waters receiving the Citarum's output remain acutely dangerous, and communities downstream continue to face health consequences from a river exploited far beyond any sustainable threshold. The Citarum and its coastal zone represent something different from the other places on this list. Lake Karache's danger is a Cold War relic. The boiling lake is a geological phenomenon that simply is what it is. The Kimberley Coast and the Dead Sea present dangers that are, in a sense, natural. The Citarum is something else entirely. It is a mirror, reflecting the consequences of treating a living waterway as a drain, of allowing industrial development without meaningful environmental accountability, of choosing short-term economic output over the long-term survival of a resource that 35 million people depend on. Swimming in the Citarum's coastal waters would be extraordinarily dangerous, but the deeper danger is not in the water. It is in the decisions that made the water what it is. 5 places. 5 very different kinds of danger: invisible radiation hiding beneath turquoise beauty, geological violence boiling from the Earth's core, prehistoric predators and impossible tidal forces, an ancient lake dissolving its own shoreline into sinkholes, and a river transformed into a toxic channel that poisoned everything downstream. What connects all five is not simply that swimming would be dangerous. What connects them is that each place tells a story about geology, history, ecology, and human decisions worth understanding. The world is full of forbidden places, and the best reason to learn about them is not fear. It is curiosity. Every place too dangerous to enter is also a window into forces and histories that shape the world you live in. The most deadly waters are often the most important to understand. Stay out of the water. But never stop asking why.